Hey millennials, welcome to the first edition of Real Talk. Real Talk is a political show built just for you. We've got real talk in real language about what's going on in this wild political year. Let's get right to it. The Donald himself was here in Dallas on Monday night in the American Airlines Center. Trump spoke for more than an hour without a teleprompter. That's right, I witnessed it myself. But before the rally, I spoke to some millennials about why they were there. Take a look at what they said.
Well, I came all the way from near Galveston to come see him speak. I wasn't really a fan of him before he announced, but whenever he gave his speech, I agreed with a lot of what he said.
Well, I just like how he doesn't really care what other people think. He speaks his mind and he's going to do what he wants to do. He's not going to let anybody else tell him what to do.
I like how he says things freely and isn't politically correct.
Honestly, it's either Bernie Sanders or Trump. I'm very much liberal, and so Bernie Sanders kind of fits all of that, you know. And then seeing Trump out here taking a new spin on politics is kind of like, you know, why not go for it?
I voted for Obama the last two elections, but I'm tired of all the political correctness and I'm tired of the gridlock in Washington. I really like what Donald Trump has to offer.
Well, you heard it. Apparently, even millennials are tired of politicians in Washington and are ready for something new. Whether or not that something new will be Donald Trump, hang on. Need proof Texas will be prime stomping ground for candidates? Exhibit 1, Donald Trump. Exhibit 2, Hillary Clinton. She's set to return to Dallas on Tuesday. A lawyer is hosting a fundraising breakfast for Clinton with about 150 of her closest friends. As fellow millennials, we know we're all busy and may not know exactly what's happening in the world of politics. But not to worry, that's why we've been keeping an eye on it in case you missed it. Here is your ICYMI of the week.
Today, I'm suspending my campaign for the presidency of the United States.
You heard it from the former governor himself. He is out of the race for the White House. The former Texas governor's Friday announcement makes him the first of the whopping 16 GOP candidates to exit the race. Perry says the abuse of power indictment against him, yes, he is facing prison time if convicted. That, combined with not making the cut for last month's primetime Republican debate, is what tanked his presidential campaign. Voters didn't give Perry a second chance at a first impression. He dropped out of the Republican primary in 2012 after a series of high-profile missteps. Remember the debate? That's when Perry struggled to remember the name of a third federal agency he would eliminate if elected. Oops. Better luck in 2020, Governor Perry. And what do a Jewish self-proclaimed socialist and a Christian conservative have in common? Nothing. But that's the point of Real Talk, right? And Bernie Sanders and Liberty University both earned some brownie points on Monday for stepping outside of their comfort zones. Sanders is second in the Democratic polls right now, not far behind the frontrunner Hillary Clinton. He spoke to students at Liberty University, which, FYI, is one of the most socially conservative colleges in the U.S. Sanders told students his views on abortion and gay rights differ from most of theirs, but asked them to try and find some common ground with him on some of these issues.
That there are other issues out there that are of enormous consequence to our country and, in fact, to the entire world. That maybe, just maybe, we do not disagree on. And maybe, just maybe, we can try to work together to resolve them.
Sanders touched on income inequality, childhood poverty, youth unemployment, and access to health care. One by one, candidates on both sides of the party line have learned that Donald Trump has no bones about speaking his mind where they're concerned. The latest example is Republican candidate Carly Fiorina. Trump mocked Fiorina's face in an online Rolling Stone magazine article. Trump says in the article, quote, "Look at that face. Would anyone vote for that?" And he didn't stop there. Trump said, "Can you imagine that? The face of our next president. I mean, She's a woman, and I'm not supposed to say bad things, but really, folks, come on. Are we serious? End quote. The Fiorina campaign fired back with this week releasing this ad. Take a listen.
Ladies, look at this face. And look at all of your faces. The face of leadership.
Trump has brushed off criticism, saying he was only referring to Fiorina's persona, not her looks. Speaking of face, the two will be just that, face to face, or persona to persona at tonight's CNN debate.
Note to Democrat Party, we are not a special
Donald
interest
Trump
group.
will once again be center stage at tonight's CNN debate. The debate will begin at 7 p.m. Central Time and will be hosted at the Reagan Library in California, where the candidates will stand in front of Air Force One. Joining Trump on the stage will be Jeb Bush, Scott Walker, Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Mike Huckabee, Rand Paul, John Kasich, Chris Christie, and Carly Fiorina. CNN's Tom Foreman explains the rules for tonight's debate. Take a listen.
The same 10 candidates we saw last time around will be on stage with the addition of Carly Fiorina, who was in the earlier so-called happy hour debate, who's now jumped up to the bigger group. What are they going to have to work with in this contest? They can't bring any phones with them, no tablets, no notes, no props. Each candidate will have a pad of paper and a pen and a glass of water. And what will they be facing? Well, our panel will be comprised of our moderator, Jake Tapper, also CNN's Dana Bash, and Hugh Hewitt from radio. They will be posing questions, along with some questions that will be taken from social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and so forth. The subject matters are going to be foreign policy, domestic policy, and politics. Big, broad topics, and with so many people on stage, they will have narrow windows in which to answer. 1 minute per answer, 30 seconds if it's a rebuttal to something else that was said about you, and we will use timing lights to show the candidates if they are running out of time. And lest you think the people who are in the earlier debate are at a huge disadvantage, yes, they may very well have a smaller audience, but they'll also have a whole lot more time to express their ideas. And under the rules, if one of them says something that is particularly sharp or interesting, that video clip can be played in the larger debate, and those candidates will have to answer to it.
Now you know who's who in the debate and what the rules are. But what can you expect to hear from the candidates? Earlier, we spoke with Dr. Ben Voth. Dr. Voth is SMU's Director of Debate and an Associate Professor of Corporate Communications and Public Affairs. Take a listen to what he had to say. Welcome to Realtalk, Dr. Voth. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad to have you here. The first question I'm going to ask you, we all know who everyone is talking about in the media right now, Donald Trump.
Of course.
What do you think he's going to say tonight in tonight's debate?
I actually think he's probably going to dial it back a little bit. I think he's sort of seen in such sensational terms. I think he probably wants to make himself seem more realistic.
Really?
But I do think it's going to be, strong statements. I don't think he's going to back down. I also think that he's probably getting ready for some sustained attacks from the wide field that's going to be on the stage. So I think he'll be aggressive in his counterattacks, but I think his opening statements will be pretty calmly stated.
Okay. So take a look at this graphic that we're going to pull up for you here. In the Fox debate, Trump got almost twice as much as the average of what the rest of the candidates got. And Bush was the closest to him and still had about 3 less minutes than he did. Can you talk about the effect that that has on the viewers and if that determines the the race?
Oh, sure. And that really breaks my heart as a director of debate, because one of the essential principles of debate is equal time. And so you see from this graphic that that's not the case. And that's not anything new. These debates, ever since they were televised, have suffered from this problem. And in this particular case, you're looking at 30% or even literally almost the doubling of time for one candidate. And it really comes down to the proper mediation of the debates, where by and large, the journalists are refocusing their questions on Donald Trump to such an extent that he's getting more time to speak. Sometimes there are also rules where if a candidate is attacked, they're entitled to at least 30 seconds of response. So that sets up a little bit of a paradox if, and this would probably happen here too, if there are a lot of attacks on Donald Trump, he'll be entitled under the rules to a response. So there's a paradox for all these candidates. Like every time you say the word Donald Trump, you might be giving him 30 seconds of airtime.
That's an interesting rule. I wasn't aware of that. Speaking of which, Donald Trump accused Megyn Kelly in the Fox debate of giving him unfair questions. Do you agree with that? And do you think CNN will try to pull back from those tough, maybe pointed questions?
I do think they will probably in the CNN debate tonight pull back from the tougher questions because of that issue. But at the same time, I would hate to say that like the journalist is per se being unfair. I think they had an interest in trying to ask hard questions, things like that. But that's part of my sort of general critique of these things. It'd be better to try to pull the journalist out more and just let the candidates debate each other. But
Right.
There's going to be probably some natural antagonism between them. But I think tonight these moderators will probably try to avoid that and be actually more similarly styled to the sub-debate that was done on Fox. Not a lot of people watched that at 5 o'clock, but it was much more tame by
Right.
comparison.
Speaking of which, Carly Fiorina is moving up into the main stage tonight.
Right.
She and Donald Trump have been taking swipes at each other in the media. What do you think is going to happen tonight in the debate between the two of them? Do you think they'll stay civil?
I really think that Carly's probably going to directly respond to this, sort of bad look argument that he made against her. And again, he has kind of this history of Megyn Kelly, similar kind of thing. So I think that's actually going to be a pretty strong springboard for her initially. And there probably will be some dialectics and fireworks between Trump and Fiorina in this debate tonight.
Well, we'll see. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Voth. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
It's primary season, and the number of candidates competing for the White House is longer than most people's grocery list, with 15 Republican and 5 Democratic contenders trying to figure out who is who and what is what can be challenging. But that's why we're here. Each week, we will highlight a few candidates, giving you a quick cheat sheet to help you navigate through this presidential primary. And we're getting help today from 2 media and politics students.
Hello, my name is Shebnem Amini.
And I'm Carly Ann Allen. This week, we are going to be focusing on the top 3 candidates who are taking over the media and surging in the polls.
We start with Donald Trump. Wednesday night, the Republican candidates returned to the stage for their second debate on CNN. Trump is leading with 33% in the most recent polls. Trump, who is 69, has been dominating the media attention since he announced his candidacy in June. He is a New Yorker, a businessman, and a former star of the reality show The Apprentice. Trump is a millionaire who is funding his own campaign with the profits from his billion-dollar real estate dynasty, and his outspoken manner has gained him friends and foes alike.
Now to the woman in the race. Carly Fiorina has been climbing in the polls and as a result is getting a lot of heat from her competitors, especially Donald Trump. Her slogan is "New Possibilities, Real Leadership," and Fiorina says she is running to take a stand against the professional political class. The 61-year-old Stanford grad is the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard and has never been elected to public office. She tried in 2010 but lost the race for California Senate. Her economic plan calls for tax cuts, less government, and less regulation. On immigration, she supports the DREAM Act. Fiorina has foreign policy experience from serving on the CIA External Advisory Board. Her history in business helps her stand out against the other candidates and puts her in competition with Trump. Many Republicans think that she could be the one to take on Hillary Clinton.
Well, born in Detroit, Ben Carson overcame poverty, racism, and a violent temper to become a world-renowned neurosurgeon. He is now retired, but Carson's campaign slogan is "Heal, Inspire, Revive." Carson, who is 63, is passionate about the federal budget. He supports a version of the flat tax advocated by some of his rivals. Under his system, all Americans would pay 10% of their income in taxes. There would be no exemptions for the poor. Carson has also advocated amending the Constitution to require Congress to balance the federal budget every year. That would mean that the government would be unable to borrow money and could only spend what it collects in taxes. On On other issues, Carson is surprisingly liberal. For example, Carson has suggested that he will consider a ban on semi-automatic assault weapons in urban areas. Those are the candidate profiles for this week.
Back to you, Kristen.
Thanks, guys. Heading into tonight's debate, Donald Trump and Ben Carson are leading in the polls. Trump, a real estate mogul and celebrity, and Carson, a famous neurosurgeon known for separating conjoined twins. Also taking the stage is Carly Fiorina, the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard. What do these three have in common? They have never been elected to a government office. Unlike their competitors, these three are political outsiders. Earlier today, I spoke with Dr. Matthew Wilson about how the rise of these political outsiders, and Wilson is a political science professor at SMU. Let's take a listen to what he had to say. I'm sitting here with Dr. Matthew Wilson. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you for having me.
So Donald Trump, Carly Fiorina, Ben Carson, all doing extremely well in the presidential race for 2016. But none of them are politicians. Can you tell us why they're so popular?
I think it reflects a public dissatisfaction with the climate in Washington and a sense of frustration about the political class not being responsive to the needs and concerns of ordinary American voters, ordinary American citizens, and the sense that sending somebody in from the outside might shake things up. As the campaign goes on, I'm not sure that these outsiders are going to stay at the top of the polls, but at least for now, they become a vehicle for the expression of that public dissatisfaction.
Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina clearly have business experience. We've seen this before being used as a platform with Mitt Romney. But Dr. Ben Carson is a neurosurgeon. Do you think that he would qualify as the President of the United States? Do you think that those skills could transfer over into the presidency?
Well, I think this is an issue with all three of them, because while you're right that the other two have business experience, as did Mitt Romney was also the governor of Massachusetts. Whether it were to be Donald Trump or Carly Fiorina or Ben Carson, if any of them gets the Republican nomination, they'll have less political experience than any major party nominee basically ever. And so I'm not sure that the skill set of being a great neurosurgeon, or for that matter, a great business leader, translates directly into being President of the United States. There are certain skills and sets of knowledge that are unique to the domain of politics and public policy, and the burden is on all three of them to show that they in fact have mastered that.
Right. So for someone who is a seasoned politician like Jeb Bush, do you think that if he adopted this rhetoric that Donald Trump has been using, would he be rising in the polls? Because he was the projected frontrunner and he has been shifting back into the pack. What do you think he needs to do to come back up?
Well, Bush needs to show a little more energy, a little more fire in the belly to show that he is excited about the prospect of being president, that he really is energized and motivated by a core set of issues that he believes in. But he can't be Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump is a unique individual. Love him, hate him. Only the Donald can be the Donald. So Bush can't be that. But he can show a little more energy and excitement, I think, and that would help his campaign.
What do you think is going to be the key for these candidates to stand out against Trump?
I think they can stand out by a deeper understanding of policy issues and also a more consistent conservatism. One of the problems for Donald Trump is that his issue positions over the years have been all over the map. I mean, here's a guy who supported single-payer health care at one point. Here's somebody who's been on every side of the abortion issue, back and forth and saying various things. Here's a guy who at one point seemed very open to the idea of increased immigration. Now, of course, he's on the other side of that issue. I think the other candidates can say, look, I've been conservative and consistently so on a range of policy issues for a long time, and that's something that Trump can't say. So I think they need to draw that policy distinction.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Here's a peek at the polls this week from Real Clear Politics. The RCP average shows Clinton as the front runner of the Democratic Party at 44.7%, while Trump is leading the GOP at 29.8%. Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden are neck and neck for the second place seat on the blue side of the stage, while Dr. Ben Carson is rapidly rising on the red stage at 17.8%. It'll be interesting to see how these numbers change after the debate tonight. We'll be watching the polls throughout the week. Millennials. Truth is, we have a bad reputation. How often do we hear someone our own age say, honestly, I really don't care about politics? Our generation is increasingly disenchanted with the way our government is run. We're tired of politicians who don't get things done. But in 10 to 20 years, it'll be our generation, millennials, making the decisions that change our country forever. It is important that we are informed on key issues affecting our country. Jacqueline Francis is here to keep you in the know.
This is On the Real. I'm Jacqueline Francis. Each week, I will highlight an important issue in the 2016 election and tell you in just 1 minute why it should matter to you. So, On the Real, immigration is a big deal. Here are some of the facts. In 2014, there were about 11.3 million unauthorized immigrants in the U.S. This number is down from its peak of a little more than 12 million in 2007. Mexicans make up over half this number. Donald Trump has made immigration, specifically unauthorized Mexican immigrants, one of the most talked about issues in this presidential race. Truth is, most people are crossing the border to find work. But since 9/11, there has been a growing concern that a weak Mexican border could be a national security threat. Currently, the ISIS terror group is reportedly operating a camp in the northern Mexican state of Chihuahua, just 8 miles from the U.S. border. So, why should you care? Well, it's a matter of safety. But Realtalk, is mass deportation and a costly wall the answer? Trump thinks so. Other candidates, not so much. That's On the Real. More real answers next week.
We're millennials, so obviously we are on social media. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Realtalk_2016. But don't just follow us. We want to hear from you guys. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you want to hear. Tweet at us during the debate tonight using the hashtag RealTalkDebate. We'll be watching and can answer your questions. And if you are particularly passionate about a candidate or an issue, tweet at us. We'd love to have you on the show to talk about it. That's all we have for you guys this week. Make sure to tune in next Wednesday to keep up with the latest Real Talk of the week.